Rishi Sunak faces a fresh backbench headache after his flagship Rwanda Bill, well, it's still around. Some 40 Tory MPs are planning various amendments which they say will strengthen the UK's immigration laws.
Well, it's after Labour tabled a vote in Parliament attempting to force the government to say how much it would cost to send each asylum seeker to Rwanda. In the studio with us, TalkTV's chief political commentator, Peter, good morning.
Good morning, hello.
So we know when this went through its first reading, there were several MPs who voiced concerns on both the further right and the further left. Now we know there's 30 to 40 who are going to cause some problems for the Prime Minister. What do they want?
Well, it's interesting. The group you mentioned that's kind of happy are the One Nation Conservatives, sort of on the left of the Conservative Party, if such a thing
Led
exists.
by Lord Cameron, ironically.
Indeed, and others. And then there's some on the right, including the whole team that used to run the Home Office. So you've got Showdown, former Home Secretary, and Robert Jenrick, former Immigration Minister. He resigned over the issue, destroyed my Wednesday evening. And it's him and a number of people around him who are keen for this to be strengthened. But the problem is that if it's strengthened, well, then it could be in breach of international law. Some people say, why does that matter? We can just ignore the European Court of Human Rights on this, and that's what Rishi Sunak should do. So I think it's highly unlikely that this amendment is going to go forward. But on Tuesday, Wednesday next week, there are going to be a series of votes on this Rwanda plan. It's just at the next stage of this legislation. It's a massive headache for Rishi Sunak. He just about got it through the last time. Reasonable majority, but the compromise was very, very interesting. So he may need to compromise yet further. But if he goes in one direction, well, then it's the people in the other direction who may cause some further problems.
Couple of things. It's quite interesting. In layman's terms, he squeaked it past, as you said, before Christmas. The One Nation Tories, centre-left, Cameron-based, you know, that Green bloke that was with Theresa May, whatever her name is. Damien Green. And then this sort of hardcore on the right, I thought led by Braverman, but interestingly, it's Jenrick whose name's on this. I know she's still involved.
Yeah.
He's in a position, in my humble opinion, where he can't win. Because if he moves further to the right and says, you're not coming in, I'm strengthening it, I don't care about the ECHR, the One Nation's Tories are going to go, oh, that's against international law, we don't like a good country. And if he softens the blow, the right wing, I'm not trying to over-exaggerate this, I mean, I've thought this for a while. Do you see this splitting the Tory party? Because this has been going on since '97 with Maastricht and John Major. And when you think about the SDP, when the Social Democratic Party broke away from Labour, Roy Jenkins, Shirley Williams, you really can see that right now because they don't sit together anymore, do they?
It is a very, very divided party, and this is a big issue. It's a sort of Brexit 2.0 issue.
Yeah.
It's not as big a deal as Brexit, but it's nonetheless an issue which is splitting the Conservative Party and will cause further fissures this, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see where, if anywhere, does Rishi Sunak go? Because everybody's saying that. Damien Green, who you mentioned, One Nation Conservative, saying, look, the Prime Minister's looked me straight in the eye and said, we're not going to break international law.
But can I just jump in? Because, Alicia, we were talking about this yesterday. For me, the real weakness of Sunak is so desperate was he to get to 10 Downing Street. I believe the biggest mistake he made was making a deal with Suella Braverman to have her back in Cabinet and say, I'll go with Rwanda because I need your support to get rid of Boris to get the job. At that moment, he signed his own death warrant, didn't he? Because you can't get this through, this divided party.
But he also became Prime Minister, Jeremy, and that is...
What, so for 2 years and now he's going to lose it, isn't he?
Well, I think it looks that way. That's what the polls are telling us. But certainly this was a compromise that to have Suella Braverman as Home Secretary was absolutely necessary for Rishi Sunak to become Prime Minister. But of course, he made a compromise in doing that.
And at the beginning, Suella Braverman was really useful to Rishi Sunak because she could say the more hardline right-wing things without him having to be the face of it. You'd think, Peter, that at this point, the Conservative Party would think, do you know what, we're going to have to find compromises within ourselves because we can't afford to implode. We need to be a sort of united
They're
group.
not like that, though,
But
Rosie.
they're not thinking like that at all.
Well, there are many desperate people who look at various by-elections. There are going to be 2 coming up shortly, and they see big majorities being overturned. 25,000 majority, 20,000 majority, not a safe seat anymore. There are desperate MPs who want to keep their seats here thinking, if I don't stick to my guns, if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, if I compromise in any way, this is going to mean I'm going to lose my seat. And survival is the key to politics. If you're not an MP, you may as well not bother.
Really interesting. That's not going to go away. And you sort of look at it and you go, that's the hill you've chosen to die on, and it's not going to get any easier. Can we talk about this Horizon scandal in the post office? This has been dominating the news all week, and quite rightly so. Late yesterday, Paula Venables, the CEO, voluntarily, finally, she handed back her CBE. We both have been quite outspoken this week. We've spoken to victims. Sured Davy, I think, is in trouble. He needs to raise his head above the parapet. Yep. But yesterday we were talking about how so many politicians, whatever side, are mired in this. This is a national disgrace, isn't it?
Well, it's been around for about 25 years, and there are lots of people, Labour and Conservative politicians, and many senior civil servants as well, who presided over a system where they ignored the fact that this was going wrong. And now what has happened is it's turned to who knew what when. And actually some of the engineers from Fujitsu, the company that put this technology together, biggest tech rollout, civilian tech rollout beyond the military, of course, of its generation, essentially. And now there are newspapers, different journalists tracking down various individual engineers, one of whom was going to give evidence to the public inquiry that's going on about this, but twice said, actually, I want immunity from prosecution if I'm going to do so, a man called Gareth Jenkins. So it's very, very interesting what's happening to him. Another senior engineer, one called Anne Chambers. The net is closing, some would argue, on those who are allegedly responsible for this absolute fiasco, and the fact that people were put out of their homes, lost their businesses, lost their reputation. Some of them lost their lives. 4 people took their own lives as a result of this journey.
And people died.
Yeah.
Without proving their innocence. The one thing that I feel really strongly about this story as well, and as you know, we did it a year ago with Nick Wallace, is actually they're all pontificating now about, if we can rush this through. There should be complete exoneration. These people should not be made to go back to any appeal court. There should be a sweeping law that says you are all innocent. I sort of feel that's more important initially than the money. I think they want to know that their names are cleared.
Some of them are cleared, but yes,
but they need to do it all.
All of them, yeah. And it is very, very interesting that you could have an act of parliament, almost unprecedented. You could have a piece of parliamentary legislation that actually overturns what the courts have done. That's very, very interesting. And the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, is thinking about that at the moment.
He should do it.
MPs are looking at what they can do as quickly as possible, really, to enact a process like that. It's just the legal issues. Some things maybe we need to just say, look, this is a one-off.
Well, usually there's a process.
Piece of legislation.
You're absolutely right, Rosie. There's usually a process where it goes to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, then it goes to the Court of Appeal. But this would actually be the legislative bit of government, the bit of government that makes the laws rather than interprets the laws, saying, actually, we're going to overturn all of these, which would be almost impressive.
You know, we moan as citizens that our government doesn't listen to us. If I was anybody in number 10, I'd be going, this is absolutely what needs to be done to the British public. Let's damn well go ahead and do it. HS2 progress, what's happening on that?
Not a lot of progress on HS2, it must be said, but certainly there was a lot that happened at a Conservative Party conference in terms of the leg being cancelled, but this is back in the news again.
Where's the money going? We were doing potholes yesterday. Are they going to use
There was a promise that some of the money would be redirected to potholes, which made people feel angry for 2 reasons. One, because trains and fixing broken roads maybe aren't comparable.
Yes.
And also people feel, well, we've heard so many promises to fix potholes. I believe we're going to get an update today on kind of the progress and the spending of HS2. Anyone sort of eagerly anticipating that their road's going to be filled in maybe needs to hold on a little bit.
Let's not get too excited about potholes. But yes, every politician coming up to every election will say, we will fill in your pothole.
Is that a political, is that a good thing to say? Is it, we'll fill up your pothole?
I mean, if they get filled up, I think people will be happy enough. But certainly for drivers who, let's remember, make the majority of journeys in this country. We all get obsessed in the media that in London gets obsessed about trains all the time, talks about tube strikes. For the vast majority of people in this country, that is not relevant. And the vast majority of journeys by public transport are made in a bus. And if you are, the vast majority of journeys in this country are made in a car. So the status of the roads, of course, is very important.
Final thing, Peter. Prime Minister's questions for the first time in 2024 today. We know probably...
He's such a nerd.
No, it's exciting.
Excited
it's
about
exciting.
it.
I'll be doing it.
How is it exciting?
I'll be at 12:25 with Julie. I'll be here.
The Post Office, of course, will come up in some capacity, but so too will Rwanda.
Yep.
What are you expecting? Because both of the men, the main ones we'll be watching, Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, have used the kind of first few weeks of this year to really lay out their stalls, so they'll presumably have a bit of an agenda later.
Yes, they will, and I think that Keir Starmer will want to put himself on the side, especially of the post office victims. I think he'll give examples, he'll talk about individual cases, and he'll say, how is the Prime Minister going to fix this?
I'm putting my hand up for a reason. He's going to give examples and say this needs sorting. He was the Director of Public Prosecutions when hundreds of people were wrongly prosecuted for something they didn't do. Surely he's also mired, isn't he?
Which is exactly what Rishi Sunak's going to say back to him and say, you could have sorted this, or at least taken a lead on this, or spoken up about this way before now.
At the risk of throwing a curveball at you, what's happened to Michael Gove's face?
What's happened to Michael Gove's face?
Did you see the pictures of him arriving at Cabinet yesterday? He'd been bashed up.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, go and for the next hour, find out who smacked Michael Gove
Who smacked Michael Gove?
Yeah.
Goodness me. OK, well, socked it to Gove.
Yes.
I don't know, it wasn't me.
Frankly, I think you could have done better research, but I'll give you an hour to find that out. Who hit Michael Gove?
It wasn't me anyway. Do you know how many physical fights I've been in my life?
I'd hope 0, Peter.
Jeremy?
About 11.
I've been in 0 physical fights in my life.
Of course you have. You're also politically correct. What, you've never had a punch-up?
Never.
Have you?
Still time.
No, I got somebody to do it for me. That's what we're talking about.
Peter, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
mate. See you in the next hour.
Political correspondent.